Welcome to Pick Up and Deliver, the podcast where I pick up my audio recorder when I drop my kid off at school and deliver an episode to you while I walk home. I'm Brendan Riley. Good morning, listeners. I hope that you're having a pleasant day. It's sunny and partly cloudy here in suburban Chicago. The weather is in the high 50s, so I'm wearing a sweater, no jacket. I know you appreciate my apparel update, my daily apparel update, and so there it is for you. So I got to play Anachrony last night, and I wanted to talk to you about that. First, I just wanted to share a story from the game, and then a bit of the experience. So playing the game was great fun. I've played Anachrony 3 times in the last 4 months. 3 times solo in the last 4 months, and this was my first multiplayer play, and boy, I'd forgotten how fun this was. I mean, I really like the solo game of it, but it's so much different than playing against other people and trying to compete with them, and getting mad when they take your spots, and just remembering how tight the economy is, and you find yourself using turn after turn to get water or whatever. It's great stuff. So I was very excited to play. It came about because I had some friends posted on the Facebook group for Toggle Gaming, my local gaming club. Sorry if you're getting tired of hearing about them. And they said, hey, does anybody have Anachrony? We'd like to try it. And I said, I have it, I can bring it out. So that led to the game. Now, the original arrangement is that we were going to play 3-player, which is good because Anachrony runs pretty long, and I had to have a meeting with the Star Chamber for Toggle, the people who decide what we're doing and when. So I had to have a meeting first, so we weren't going to get started on the teaching the game till like 7:15, and actually it was more like 7:30 by the time I started teaching. Well, in that time, the 2 people who had said we were just going to play 3 people invited a 4th player, which was fine with me, but I had told them this is a pretty long game with 3. Inviting a 4th, we had decided earlier, would not be a good idea because the game would just go too long. Well, they invited a 4th anyway, which is fine with me. We still had fun. It was great. Actually, I'm really glad it was 4 players, but the game ran right up till midnight. We finished on time, and I finished cleaning up at 12:02, which they asked us to be out by 12, so yikes. I try not to do that very often, but it was fun. So I wanted to share a moment from the game that got me thinking about the episode for today. If you haven't played Anachrony, the end condition is a little variable. There are 7 rounds possible in the game, and after 4, there's a cataclysm, which is this sort of big moment where the game board shifts, and the 9, in a 4-player game, the 9 multiplayer spaces, the spaces you can go to if you're sending a worker to the main board, those 9 spaces become one use, meaning once someone has used them, then the tile on them flips over and you can't use them again ever. Which means that over the course of a couple rounds, those spaces basically become unavailable entirely, and you're almost entirely dependent on the couple big spaces like the water desalinization plant and the Nomad exchange zone. And then you're also dependent on your engine that you've built. If you've built a good engine by that point through buying buildings, then you've got a system where hopefully you're able to get what you need to accomplish your last few objectives. Well, we got to the point where at the end of the 6th round, all but one of the spaces had been taken. And if that last space had been taken, then we don't even play the 7th round. That's the rule. Once all the one-use spaces are taken, then that's the end of the game, or the end of that round is the end of the game. And so I was planning to take that last space at the end of the turn. And I realized as we're going along that one of the other players was waiting to see what I was going to do before he decided whether to take his evacuate action or not, which was going to get him like 6 points, versus if we played another round, he could probably get more. So I was planning to take that space, not because I really wanted to, although I was probably in the lead, so ending the game was better than letting him have a chance to get more points. But actually because time was running long. By that point, it was like 11:25. And then I used the wrong worker. I sent my scientist to get some water so I could get the water bonus. Then I realized I didn't have any scientists left, and the one space I needed to go to close out the game was a scientist space. And since he was planning on having that 7th round, I said, okay, well, a mistake is a mistake. And I realized this like not immediately after I placed the token, but like a whole nother round later. So, walking it back would have depended on everybody agreeing to let me walk it back, which I didn't want to demand or ask really hard for since he was planning on having that next round. So this got me thinking a little bit about playing games where you perceive, and I did win the game by 10 points. I beat him by 10. I got 65, he got 55, the other players got 47 and 45. So I won by a decent margin. But I wanted us to think a little about, or I wanted to think today a little bit about pulling your punches. And I was dithering about what I'm going to call the episode. I actually still haven't decided. It could be sandbagging, it could be handicapping, or it could be pulling your punches. All three speak to different motives of the same thing, so I'm going to talk about all three. And I will say so thinking about if I had actively chosen not to take that space because I could see he really wanted a 7th round, that would be one example of a kind of thing I would sometimes do. Like I would think about, can I use the next round to get points? Usually the answer is yes, in which case I would not foreclose his opportunity to get points. Because for me, the playing of it is more important than the winning of it. And if I can help someone else have a pleasurable experience at the end of the game because they feel like they did their best, rather than cutting them off at the knees at the last minute, I generally will prefer that other version, the Care Bear approach. The other thing I did is right at the beginning of the game, like I said, this is probably my 10th play, 12th play, 15th play, somewhere in there of Anachrony overall ever since I got it in 2017. And I play it every few months. And especially because I've played it solo a few times, three times so far this year, I feel like I'm much more well versed in the game. Obviously I'm the one teaching it, but I know what to expect, and even though I've explained things, people kind of miss them. Like one of the people at the end when we started to go through the scoring cards, she's like, wait, what are those? And I'm like, they're the scoring cards, we talked about this. And she's like, I'm sorry, I must have drifted off during that part. So stuff like that, along with just sort of understanding the nuance, even though I give a couple strategy tips and I hit the don't forget about power cores rule pretty hard. Like we still had one player who had one round where he only powered up one, or he wasn't able to power up very many suits because he didn't have any power cores. But so at the beginning, when we're picking our leaders, I had two leaders. I got dominance. I let them all pick their factions first. I ended up with dominance. And so I had the two choices. And Captain Wolf lets you exchange, I think, 2 water for a power core during the power-up phase. And that is a very powerful action because it's, in my mind, easier to get an engine where you get lots of water than it is to get an engine where you're getting lots of power cores. In fact, there are very few things that get you lots of power cores, although I found one. And so from that perspective, using him to get lots of water, which would keep me in flush and power cores, felt like it would be a really strong choice. So I actually chose the other one where I get 1 free resource from the leftover resources and I can pay 2 water to get a second one. I used her instead just because I didn't see as easily how to get an engine working with that as my model. So those are the 2 examples of in our game last night of how I might have changed the way I play. So I wanted to think about those 3 phrases, and for people who aren't in the US, the 3 phrases again, the idioms we use are sandbagging, pulling your punches, and handicapping. And I'm going to put them in that order as sort of the level of rudeness. So sandbagging, I'm not sure where this phrase comes from, I'm going to have to look it up. But it comes from the idea of intentionally doing worse. Oh, I think it's a horse racing thing. They put sandbags on the horse so they will run slower. which is more like handicapping actually. But sandbagging is where you intentionally slack off. You intentionally don't play as well as you can. It's often used in sports to describe somebody who's hanging back or not trying as hard as they should. Maybe because they're lazy, maybe because they have some reason they don't want the team to win. But in gameplay of like a sort of aggressive Euro style, I would describe sandbagging as intentionally playing poorly or intentionally letting your opponents get ahead. Like for instance, one of the times I played Reykholt with my wife and my mother-in-law, I explained how important the special action cards were. And then there were there was a round where I didn't take the special action card, even though I thought it was a very good one and it would really fit my strategy. And instead I said, all right, I'm gonna do this other thing instead of taking the special action card because neither of you have taken it. And they're really important, so I want to give you the opportunity. And then neither of them took it again, so I took it the next one, and I cleaned up in the game, which didn't surprise me, but... so sandbagging, but generally sandbagging is going to be something you do without letting the other players know. And it's hard to see that because often it's seen as malicious, and I don't know when you would do that in a board game. The second one is something probably more common, especially if you're a Care Bear player like I am, and that's pulling your punches. So pulling your punches is a boxing term that suggests you're not hitting as hard as you could. You're pulling them back before they hit. Or maybe it's an acting term, I don't know. I'm talking like I know for sure, I don't. This is just my understanding of where it comes from. But the idea is you're not hitting as hard as you could in a fight of some sort. In board game terms, that would literally point to something like taking a less efficient action because I can see that the other players need the more efficient one. Pulling my punches would have been if I'd intentionally used my scientist in a different way so the round didn't end because I could see the other player needed it. Or like I see the other players really building up to build something and I want to also, but I do something else to let them have a shot at the building space. There are a lot of people who'd find pulling your punches really frustrating. I certainly try not to do it very often after the learning game with anybody really, but especially with my wife. If my wife thinks that I'm intentionally playing poorly, she gets really irritated, and I get that. So I think in part of the reason that pulling your punches, that this intentionally playing less skillfully is frustrating to people, is that it's sort of paternalistic. It's mollycoddling. It's telling them, hey, I know better than you how to play the game, so I'm just going to go easy on you. It's not an ideal approach to making a game friendly for the other players, because it gives them, I don't know, it doesn't give them the opportunity to succeed. It instead puts the onus on you to help them succeed, and that's not fun either. Which leads into my third choice about how to even the stakes, and I think the preferred method, and that's handicapping. Handicapping is, of course, where you recognize at the beginning that the players are unequal, and you give one of them a demerit of some sort to even the stakes, right? In horse racing, they literally put weight on the horse, which is maybe where sandbagging comes from. But they handicap the horse. They make it harder for the horse to run. In golf, you get a score bonus or penalty. When I was a kid and I used to play chess with my dad, we would always play at least 2 games. In the first game, we'd just play straight up and he'd kill me. And then the second game, he would pick some number of pieces to take off of his board at the beginning. And that would be the handicap. And then as I got better at chess, he would start with more and more pieces on the board until we just started the games straight even. So there's a couple different ways to do handicapping. I think most of the time, a direct handicapping is not ideal because, again, it feels paternalistic to say, I'm so much better at this than you, I'm going to just take a penalty. Unless the game, you have a long track record and you agree on that, that's not going to be ideal. But you can set yourself up in ways that works well. The 2 examples that I have here, one is, again, this from Anachrony. I think by choosing the starting leader that I thought was less advantageous or I wasn't as clear how to use, I have handicapped myself. I've made it harder for myself to play the game, but I can play to my full effort then because I set myself up to have these reduced options. or this less easily exploited option. The second option would be to have an alternate goal. Like for instance, in the game Welcome To, there's a goal sheet that you can keep where you have a goal of winning the game and achieving one of these other things, usually which make it harder to win. So I've been doing that when I play that game as a sort of extra challenge to myself, but also a way to even the playing stakes a little bit. So I'm curious, what are your thoughts about handicapping or sandbagging or pulling your punches? Do you ever do that? Do you find situations where that makes the game more fun? For me, as I've said before, a big part of playing a game is making sure everybody has fun. And I find often that if I introduce one of these schemes, we all have more fun. So thanks for joining me. Let me know over on Board Game Geek Guild 3269 your experience with this kind of play and whether you do it. I look forward to hearing what your thoughts on the subject are. In the meantime, I hope your next walk is as pleasant as mine was. Thanks for joining me. Bye-bye.
Brought to you by Rattlebox Games.